And that is how specific we're getting. That's how deep we have to dig to find the differences. Hello and welcome back to Phil's Corner. It's good to be chatting to you again today. And in today's episode, we're going to be playing a bit of Spot the Difference. We're going to be talking about the recently released Adidas Retro Collection, and in particular, trying to establish any differences there are between the original shirts that these retro kits are based on and the re-releases. This is a surprisingly complex subject. You'd think it would be pretty easy, but actually it's not. And even for someone like me who spends a lot of time in this world, it's not easy. So we're going to talk about that today, and hopefully it can be a bit of an educational one for myself as well as you guys. But before we get into the topic of today's video, I want to say thank you. Firstly, to all of you guys just for simply watching this video, and in particular if you're subscribed to this channel. If you're not subscribed and you're watching this video, make sure you change that. Make sure you subscribe by pressing the subscribe button. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when I go live for various live streams that I do. Most Tuesday evenings we're live here chatting about shirts, and I also do pre-recorded videos like this, of course. So again, being a subscriber keeps you up to date with new content, and it's just a free way to support the channel. So thank you to you guys if you are subscribed. I also want to say a big thank you to my supporters on Patreon. And if you're wondering what I'm doing over at my Patreon, you can check out the link in the description below. And one of the small benefits you get as a patron is that you get first dibs on my collection sales. So when I sell stuff from my collection, I always put it to my patrons first. They get an opportunity to pick up those shirts before I put the shirts to Twitter or eBay or however I end up selling them. So that's a small benefit. And I also do regular giveaways. So we just had a range of giveaways. And again, those giveaways are exclusive to members of my Patreon. So there's a bunch of stuff. I've not even mentioned the best thing, which is a shirt as part of your support. So check out the link in the description if you'd like to support me further. And thanks to those who are already doing so. And as part of the intro for today, I'm also going to respond to a comment I had on my last video. I like to do this. Respond to some comments, and indeed if you have any questions off the back of today's video, or just simply a question about collecting or a comment about football shirts or whatever it might be, if you leave a comment in today's video, there's a chance I'll respond to it at the start of the next video. So that is something you can do. And indeed, Lafree, who is a recent member of the Patreon that I just mentioned, says, "Great video, Phil. Thank you so much, my friend. I completely forgot about the onesie kit. That was a lot of fun to talk about." He says, "I would love a discussion about fakes. The main thing I always notice with fakes is the team badge. On real shirts, the badge feels firm and crisp. The fake ones seem to always have flimsy badges." Now, we won't do a full kind of episode length discussion at this point, but I do just want to touch on fakes, and I think it is an ongoing discussion point. Indeed, it's important, I think, to discuss it, and we talked a bit about fakes, didn't we, in the A to Z video, which was the most recent one we did. And you're absolutely right that often the badge is one of the best places to go to try and establish if a shirt is real or not. And you're looking at a number of aspects of the badge. Indeed, the materials, like you mentioned, Lafree, are a huge consideration. So you're looking for consistency in terms of the makeup of the badge. And of course, you're also considering things like if a shirt's replica or player spec, there will be differences, but certainly the material was key. And I think it's also the quality or the kind of elements that make up a badge. So particularly if there's any text, such as a team name, because there's very little margin for error, particularly if it's a plastic crest or a sublimated crest, something like that, where because of the production process, there simply isn't the kind of variation which you would potentially see with older shirts. Now again, with older shirts or vintage shirts, particularly if you've got embroidered crest, there may be a bit of variation. You might have the odd loose thread here and there, but you can look for things like joining stitches. So to use one example, which sadly you can't apply as a general rule, but to use one thing that I've noticed in the past, with embroidered crests, particularly on older shirts, one classic tell of a fake is that the text in a crest, so say the team name, might be joined, and simply it's a bit sloppier or a bit kind of quicker to make, to not actually have nice distinct letters. But that is one thing which you may notice as a difference between a real and a fake shirt. Now again, don't take that as a general rule. Sometimes genuine shirts have embroidered text which is joined in some way by thread, but it's one thing to kind of consider, and ultimately it does just come down to looking at a real shirt or a shirt that you know is real from another collector or a reputable seller and comparing it with pictures of the shirt which you're looking to buy or which you're looking to verify. And that is kind of the process a lot of the time. And indeed today's video will be kind of doing a bit of comparison and talking about some of these differences. And the main thing I'd say to you, Lefree, or indeed anyone watching, is that it is really difficult. It does catch people out. Ultimately, I would always be against fakes and encourage people not to buy fakes. But at the same time, I think the most important thing is that you are aware how to spot one. And I'm repeating some of what we said in the previous video and the previous discussion. But I do want to emphasize that, and I think it's a really important thing. So great topic to bring up. And indeed, if you want to talk more about fakes, guys, we can go into that discussion more in future videos. Let me know in the comments. That's the best way to let me know that you want that content, so we can get into that for sure. But now let's cross over into our main topic for today, which is the recently released Adidas Retro collection. And this is a huge talking point in the community for a number of reasons. Let's get a bit of background. Let's talk about the collection and talk about retro remakes in general. So at the time of recording, Adidas have just released a big retro collection. And when I say big, I mean big. It's a multi-team, multi-item collection, which is very retro. And indeed the highlight items, or the focal point of the collection, is a series of re-releases of classic Adidas kits. Now Adidas have a lot of history doing this. For several years they have done these sorts of collections. Typically they're themed around international kits, although there have been club re-releases in this sort of approach. And one of the interesting things to note, if you look back over previous collections, is that in different ways the shirts of these collections have been getting more and more like the originals. In some of those earlier collections, so we're talking like almost 10 years now, you would always be able to tell some differences. There'd be a key detail missing, or maybe something quite different about elements of the kit, which would identify it quite obviously as a re-release. But we're seeing the gap get narrower and narrower, and now in this new collection, many people and even experienced collectors have said quite rightly that it's hard to tell the difference, certainly at first glance. And I was actually surprised when I looked into this a bit more and was preparing for this video. It really is hard to spot the difference. It's not as easy as it was in previous years. Now before we talk about the differences or similarities, a bit more discussion on the collection. It's also worth noting the choice of shirts in this collection. Now across the various re-released kits, some kits for the likes of Germany and Spain are shirts which are quite readily available on the vintage market. Now I say readily available, they're not popping up everywhere, but you do see particularly the Spain and Germany designs quite often. And the price point of these vintage kits is often similar or even less sometimes than the re-releases. This has sparked again a lot of discussion, and I think it's quite interesting because the contrast between, say, these Germany and Spain kits and the Argentina kit, which is going to be the focus of today's episode, is notable. The Argentina kit will certainly sell for a lot more as a vintage shirt compared to the retro kit, whereas the Germany kit can be found for less. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there, and you kind of have to take these individual shirts on a shirt by shirt basis in that regard. But let's talk about this in more detail now. There are some real nuances in this discussion, and in many ways I've had to pull a lot of different pieces of information together, and I particularly want to shout out Gary Walker, a member of the community, who wrote a fantastic piece diving deeper into the Argentina 1994 shirt in particular. And his piece, which I'll link below in the description, was incredibly helpful in establishing a number of things which I looked at and didn't really understand at first glance. And indeed, one of the things that Gary mentioned in his piece, which kind of kicks off our discussion, is that the Argentina 1994 retro shirt is not actually the 1994 away shirt at all. The re-release, the retro kit, which is coming out in December, is actually based on the shirts that were post 1994. So we're talking between 95 to 97. I believe it's the 96 version specifically, but there are different versions of the kit, and this is the first thing to say in our discussion. When you're looking at retro kits, particularly international kits, what you often see are very subtle differences, and these differences can be found in all sorts of elements. Things like the subliminal patterns on kits, and this is one different thing about the Argentina kit. In 1994, Though it looks quite plain in many pictures, there was a subtle pattern which included the very subtle Federation logo, but also some 3-stripe detailing. And you can only see it in certain pictures and it is hard to find. But in later versions of the kit, we had just the Argentina Federation logo, and indeed the re-release, the retro kit that you'll see, has a nod to some of those later styles of patterns. So you have things like that. You might see changes in the logo, and particularly for things like Olympic teams, football teams will often have flags instead of Federation crests and things like that. And there can be some really granular, really specific differences. Take, for example, the jock tag, and again with the Argentina kit there was some variation, going from the 94 World Cup and into later years when the shirt continued to be used as an away kit for both the senior and youth sides of Argentina. We had different borders, so it was red one time and gold another time, and the text colour varied as well. So really this is quite a key point in this discussion. When you're looking at vintage kits, consider the fact that there may be different versions. I didn't even talk about the fact that sometimes a kit will look drastically different because it was manufactured in a different region. That tends to be less of an issue now, but certainly with vintage kits, the differences are very large. Many of you will know the differences, for example, in the Holland 88 shirt, which can look very different depending on where the shirt was manufactured. So it's so difficult, and again, it really does come down to doing as much research as you can. And sometimes if you see pictures, particularly of a player wearing the shirt on the pitch, those specific versions might be almost impossible to find in terms of replicas. So it's not always the case that you can compare a picture of a player on the pitch in a game to the shirt that you're seeing online. Just because there are differences doesn't mean the shirt you're looking to buy isn't real. But again, jumping back to the Argentina shirt, it is a very, very faithful reproduction. Several details are exactly the same or very, very similar to the original, such as even the small label on the side of the kit. Now this is something which caught me out when I was looking at this kit and looking at pictures of the re-release of the newly released retro kit. One of the first things I thought was, oh wait, you don't have the small black label with 3 stripes on the side of the kit, and most of the promo pictures don't show that. But Gary helpfully pointed out in his piece that there is actually a small black label. So we can't see that's the difference. That is the same as the old kit and the new kit. What about the pattern? Again, we mentioned the differences. This pattern is faithful, is the same as the 96 away. Having the AFA logo, the Federation logo all over, that's effectively the same. It is different to the 94 kit, and again this is a real kind of specific thing, but if you were comparing the retro re-release to the 94 kit you might notice a difference, but it is similar to the 96, so it's certainly consistent with history. And another thing which caught me out was the order of the colours on the collar. Now if you look at pictures of the 1994 away shirt compared to the retro re-release, you might notice that the stripes on the collar are different. Initially I thought this was a great way of telling if the shirt was new or old. If the re-release was different, that would be a clear kind of indicator. But in a similar story, you do actually see the configuration, which is blue, black, white on the re-release. That is the same as the 96 away. So again, you can't compare with pictures of the 94 shirt because you will see the differences, but on the 96 away and indeed the retro re-release, you have that same order. So going from left to right on the collar, of course you'll see on the pictures, blue, black, white, that is the order of the colours. So the same as the 96 away, different to the 94 away. One other thing to note is that if you look at pictures of the 94 away, you don't have the registered trademark symbol, the R in the circle. That is there for indeed the retro kit, the re-release, but it isn't there for the 94. I believe the 96 does have the registered trademark R though, and again it's a big thing. I think the kind of takeaway is this is actually a re-release of the 96 shirt, not the 94 shirt, despite the similarities. But yeah, we can't use that as an obvious indicator. So after all of this, there are only 2 distinct differences that I can see between the re-release, the retro re-release, and the original 96 kit. Now again, comparing the retro kit to the 94, there are some more differences with the stripes on the collar, with the registered trademark, with the pattern even, or the subliminal pattern. But with the 96 compared to the re-release, the differences are much less obvious. But one of the 2 differences is the inside of the popper button, and that is how specific we're getting. That's how deep we have to dig to find the differences. The inside of the re-release is silver, I believe. It's still blue on the outside, so of course, again, when you wear the shirt buttoned up, you won't notice the difference. But the inside of the button, as far as I can tell, is silver. And I believe on the 96 it's blue. Now I hope I've got that right, because again, it's been hard, as you can see, all the differences and knowing whether it's the 94, the 96, and kind of comparing with the retro kit. There's a lot of potential places to get things wrong, so I hope I've got that right. But more helpful than that, more helpful than the colour of the inside popper button, is the fact that the inside label explicitly states Bring Back Collection. Now I wasn't able to get a picture of this at the time of recording. I'm going to hopefully find a picture of this. But one thing which collectors noticed on the recently re-released Leon retro shirt was that the inside label stated Bring Back Collection. So I was really happy to hear that these Adidas retro kits do have a label which is different from the vintage kits. Because the more I looked into this, the more I realised how difficult this was. The more I realised there weren't actually some really easy telltale signs. Things like the small label on the side. We couldn't use that as a guide. We couldn't use the configuration of the 3 stripes on the collar. We couldn't look to things like the subliminal pattern or the jock tag. Those were almost the same, if not the same, as the old kit, the 96 kit, not the 94 kit, just to add more complexity to this whole thing. But yeah, the inside label is different, and the great thing about this is if you are a collector, if you're trying to buy this shirt, or indeed the Germany or the Spain shirt or the other shirts online, make sure you get a picture of the inside label. Indeed, this is particularly important for those kits where the vintage kit is so much more expensive than the retro kit, but even if they're the same, you should still be understanding if this is a re-release or not, because that will help inform your purchasing decision. It's just good to know that, if nothing else, for peace of mind. If you don't care either way, of course that's great. You still want to make sure the shirt's real. And actually, the great thing about this label is that you all know that it's an official re-release. There is a difference when Adidas release these retro kits compared to buying a fake. Yes, the price is going to be much more on the Adidas kit, but you know you're buying a genuine product and you're not supporting potentially criminal activity through fake shirts. So there's lots to be said about that. But yeah, ask for the inside label. And this is just a good principle in general, guys. When you're out there buying shirts, you're out on eBay or you're shopping in a store, whatever it might be, check out those inside labels to make sure that you're looking at a genuine kit. And if you're not sure, compare online, try and get pictures of the inside label of a vintage kit and compare it with what you've got in your hands or what you've got on your screen. So often the inside label is the key to identifying fakes, to establishing whether a shirt is a re-release. And indeed, with this retro kit, that's basically the only way sometimes you're going to be able to spot the difference, certainly with the Argentina kit. I want to wrap up our discussion so this video doesn't go on for too long. But one thing to point out is that on some of the other shirts, take the Germany shirt, it's been pointed out to me that there are actually some more noticeable differences in the crest. So Andy, shout out to Andy, a good friend, who pointed out that his original Germany shirt has a slightly different crest to the re-release. So you might see more obvious details like that as opposed to this Argentina one, which is much harder to spot. And it's funny how some of the retro kits are closer than others, but whatever, that's Adidas' decision. So to wrap up our discussion, just to recap, think about the fact that you will often have multiple versions of shirts when you're trying to do these comparisons. Adidas themselves have kind of confused us a bit by announcing this Argentina shirt as a re-release of the 94 away, when in fact it's actually a re-release of the 96 away. So that's a confusing area to get your head around. When you're looking for differences, often it is going to be only the inside label which can give you conclusive, or at least kind of comfortable, proof that it is a retro kit. Sometimes there will be differences in elements like a pattern or the crest, but you can see here how closely matched this retro kit has been to the vintage kit. It gives people like me a headache, let alone someone who's newer to the game. But hopefully some of this video has been helpful to you. Hopefully it's been interesting. I do want to say thank you again to Gary especially for his hard work. If you read his article, he goes into some more details which I've not gone into today, but it was very valuable and very helpful to me. And this is what the community is all about, helping each other, sharing knowledge. Hopefully I've been able to do that in a small way with this video. But that will do it for today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. As I said at the start, make sure you subscribe. If you're subscribed, you keep up to date with what's happening at Phil's Corner. New videos when they go live, live streams when they happen, and you'll just be a part of this community. And if you want to join another community, I have a Patreon where there's a bunch of benefits. Check that out in the description. But thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you for taking some time out of your day. See you very soon for another one.